How to find, build, and deliver generative AI projects. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire process that we use inside of our company, Data Lumina, to build custom generative AI solutions for our clients. Now, on that note, this video is not for you if you're looking to learn more about how to build and deliver generative AI solutions using no-code tools like Zapier, Make, VoiceFlow, or Podpress, which are all great, by the way, but this video is really going to dive into building custom solutions. So this video is for engineers and developers who want to build and explore generative AI applications in their own company, or for example, do that as an independent contractor or freelancer to really start your own thing, which is really a great opportunity right now for every developer that is really interested in working with generative AI. This video is split up into 3 parts. First, we'll look at how to find generative AI projects. We'll share some tactics that we use inside of our company. Then how to build. We're really getting to the specifics, the tech stack, the frameworks, the processes, the tools that we use, everything. And then we talk about how to deliver these generative AI projects, because it's one thing to build something locally on your laptop that works, but putting that into production where it can run and the client can access it, that's a whole different story. And that's the most challenging part. So that's how it is split up. Quick context about me for those of you that don't know me. My name is Dave Ebelaar. I'm the founder of Data Lumina, and we help organizations and individuals to navigate the AI revolution. And we do that by building custom data solutions for the clients that we work with. And we also cultivate technological leadership through our educational resources. That is our YouTube channel, our free community Data Alchemy, which you can check out, and our paid community Data Freelancer, where we help data professionals to get started with freelancing by showing them how we run our company, how we find clients, and collaborating with them. Now, if you want to follow along with this document, you can click the link in the description. You'll see a link to this document. If you click it, you can duplicate or download it after signing up for ClickUp. So if that's something you want, you can do that. You can also export it to Markdown to put into Notion, Obsidian, whatever tool that you are using. So with that out of the way, let's get straight into things and start with part 1, how to find generative AI projects. I have a diagram over here and a step-by-step instructions. Let's first break it down really at the core, most top fundamental level. What do you need in order to find these projects? It's split up into 3 parts. You have the offer, you have acquisition methods, so how to find leads, and you have sales. After finding those leads, how do you actually sell the project to them? So let's start with the offer. This is really, what are you going to sell? And when you're starting out, you should ask yourself the question, are you going to go general or are you going to niche down? General really is, okay, what's your problem? You talk to the clients. They say, hey, we have problem X, Y, and Z. And you say, hey, I can build that for you. Going niche is you go to the client, say, you have a problem, I have the solution. You go specific. You know a certain problem that, for example, a niche or a market is dealing with, and you build a tailored solution for that. If you're just starting out, and that's probably you if you're watching this video, then I would recommend start general first. Just talk to people and let them tell you what it is that they want, and then figure out if you can help them. So how do you start? And for this, you need to be experienced. So you need to be a developer, a data scientist, machine learning engineer, software engineer, data engineer, and ideally have some experience with generative AI under your belt, because building custom solutions is hard. And you can start by, for example, solving a problem that you are experienced. This is a great way to start. Something else that you can do is research successful generative AI use cases. And I've listed some of them here, where you could really think about the main departments that almost every company has. So marketing, sales, support, and operations. These are really, for all of these departments, generative AI can be great, and there are lots of solutions. So take some inspiration from there, see if there's something that you like. That could also be a great starting point. So you can either just pick something on your own, start with that to build your own portfolio, or what you could also do, very powerful, offer to work for free in return for testimonial and some referrals. So go out to some people in your network, a company, your boss, clients you've worked with in the past. Doesn't matter. Find a company that is interested in doing something with generative AI and see if you can help them out. Maybe do it for a small fee, maybe do it for free, but really the goal here really is to get that case study and ideally a testimonial to first and foremost also build confidence. So you know, hey, I can do this. I can actually deliver value to companies using the skills and that I have and these tools. That is the offer. What are you going to sell? Get clear on that. I would recommend starting general, and then from there we get into the next step, which is acquisition. So how to find and convert leads. And now if you're here because you just want to know how to build these projects or you want to do something within your company, then you can kind of like skip over these steps and skip this video a little bit where we get into part 2. But if you're new to this and you're looking to find clients, this is where you should start. So with acquisition, here are some tips to get started with this, and I will link some more resources later, but high level. Start with your current network. This is the easiest way to start. So especially if you already have a case study, you have some experience, just reach out to people in your current network, either via email, direct messages, WhatsApp, LinkedIn DMs, and ask if the solutions you've built could be interesting for them or someone they know. The cool thing about generative AI right now is that if implemented correctly, of course, it can really add value to any company, any industry. It doesn't matter. Every company has marketing, sales, operations, support, and that's really where generative AI shines. And then it's really about getting the right use case, making it small and tangible enough to solve a specific problem. So start with your network. Next to that, I would recommend leveraging social media platforms. LinkedIn, YouTube are the two best ways to get started. I understand YouTube is not for everyone, can be a big step, but it's highly effective. LinkedIn, a little bit easier to get started with. You just write a post. A lot of people then ask, okay, but what do I share? What do I write about? The best thing that you can do is share your experience and share the things that you've learned. Because in doing so, you let people know that you're actively working on this, you're learning about this, and people over time will naturally start to reach out to you asking like, hey, I'm actually interested in X. You talk about X all the time. Can you help me with this? That's how it works. It's really powerful. And even like one LinkedIn post could get the ball rolling. So don't underestimate this. Then another important principle to keep in mind when posting on social media, don't sell directly, give value. So don't go out on LinkedIn, for example, asking all the time like, hey, I'm looking for clients to work with. Can you help me? Now, occasionally you can do this, but the long-term play is to give value. So share what you've learned, share interesting insights, share knowledge, share news. And over time, people will naturally start to reach out to you. That's the principle that you should keep in mind. Another way to find leads is by actually posting in Discord communities for popular frameworks and tools that you're, for example, working with. So this is a very interesting one and it is gaining more and more popularity. But by just showing up there and answering the technical questions people might have, they will naturally again start to reach out to you asking like, hey, I'm actually working on this project. I have this question about this particular framework. Here I give an example of VAPI. And then they come into that community to look for answers. And if you see that they're the expert and they're willing to pay you something for that, they might hire you as a consultant or a developer to start working with it. Interesting place for developers to find leads. Then another great way to connect with people and share insights is via school. So you can, for example, come to Data Alchemy, which is my free group. I will leave the link in the description. We have over 15,000 members over here. It's actually quite funny. The people that always show up here in the community and that post a lot, that add value, people will naturally start to reach out to them and ask for help. So for example, that happened to Brandon multiple times already because he's really active in here, and that could be a great way to get your foot in the door as well. And then finally, you could look into freelance platforms like Fiverr or Upwork. But please note, while these platforms are great, they can work. In the beginning, it's really challenging to get started with that. All right, and then let's get into the next part, which is sales. So how to sell a project. And the thing that I want you to keep in mind here is finding leads is easy. Sales is hard if you don't have the right experience or strategies. And the interesting thing here is that everyone thinks that finding potential customers, finding leads is hard, because this is the number one question that people ask when, for example, they come to us on discovery calls for Data Freelancer. Number one question that they have is, how do I find clients? I always tell them finding leads, finding clients is very easy. You can literally walk up to any business owner right now, probably, and ask them, hey, is AI on your roadmap? Do you want to do something with AI? Probably all of them, almost all of them will say, yes, we're not sure, but we know AI is there. We want to do something with this. That's a lead. They're interested. But now converting that lead into a customer, i.e. sales, by now coming in, stepping in, saying like, here's how I can help you. Here's the price. Here's what I can do. Building confidence, building trust. That is a lot harder. Again, if you don't have the right experience and the right strategies. So how do you do it correctly? And of course, I'm going to give you a summary here. All of the topics that we're discussing here could have a separate 60-minute video on its own, but this video, the goal is to give you an outline. If at any point in this video, by the way, you have questions or you want me to dive deeper into certain topics, leave a comment. I'll consider it for a future video, or I can answer you in the comments. But here's how we do it at Data Lumina currently. And for this, I'm going to scroll up to this image over here. Let me see. Yeah, so we talked about the offer. We talked about the acquisition strategies. And by the way, for our company right now, just in case you're curious, all of our clients come through either LinkedIn, YouTube, or referrals or previous clients. That's where we are currently at. So we don't have to do any cold outreach, send messages. That's how powerful social media can be. But now let's get into sales. So sales, for us at least, for most companies, starts with a discovery call. So this is an online call. We do that via Zoom. We let people schedule via Calendly. We also sometimes let them fill out some questionnaires. So what's your company about? What's the problem? What's the budget? So we get some data points already. And on the call, you shouldn't really think about it as a sales call, because really, while it is a discovery call, the core thing that you should do is ask questions. Lots of questions. So you don't open up the call and say, hey, I'm a developer. I have this, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. Do you want to buy from me? No, that's the last thing you want to do. A successful discovery call is asking as many questions as possible to, first of all, really understand the pain points of the customer, understand that you can actually help them, understand that it's the right fit. And in doing so, you also build trust because you show that you're an expert. You ask the right questions, you trigger them. Next to that, you can also offer advice. The funny thing is, a lot of companies, they have no idea what they want. The thing that they come up, they show up to you on a discovery call and they say, we want to do things with AI. Sometimes it's a little bit more specific. We want to do AI for marketing. We want to do AI for content, but they have no idea. So you should then also step in as the expert and offer advice. This again builds trust, higher chance that the sale will come through. It's also important on that initial call to talk about some price expectation. Hey, are you sure you want to do this? The scope that we're talking about right now, this could very well go into the 20K, depending of course on the size of the project. Make sure that they are aware of the kind of range that you're at for such a project. Now, later, you can see the arrow over here. After the call, you can create a specific proposal because a lot of the times you get a lot of data on that call by asking all of those questions, and then you need to take a step back and dive in and really create a thorough proposal. So this is where you outline scope, timelines, prices, deliverables, and then you put a price on it. This can either be a fixed price, so you say, okay, this is a 10K project, it's going to take me 4 weeks, this is what I'm going to deliver. You can do sprint-based pricing, where you say, okay, we do 2-week sprints, price for sprint is X, or you could say, here's my hourly rate, I think it's going to take me around 40 to 50 hours maybe, and we'll do it like that. There are multiple ways to go about this, and you should figure out something that works for you. What we usually like to do is fixed prices in set intervals. So for example, we sell a proof of concept, we sell an MVP, we for example put 4 weeks on it, 6 weeks on it, etc. to clearly define the scope. But talk about it on the first call so they know what to expect. Also important, talk about potential hidden costs, API costs, management costs. Hey, do you know actually if we implement this solution for you, do you know that we can build this? There's an upfront cost for the development, but also there's going to be maintenance cost, API costs. Set the ranges for them, give the expectations so they know, oh, it's not only upfront, I pay you one time, but this is an ongoing thing, because maintaining and improving custom solutions like this, a lot of work. It's challenging. It takes time, so you need to get paid for that as well. Usually what we like to do, once we create the proposal, which we usually do either in a simple document or PowerPoint presentation, we discuss the proposal on a second call or share it via email. We found that discussing it on a second call where the client is there works better, because if you share it via email, they might have a lot of questions, they're not sure about things, and sometimes they just ghost you. And then next step, if everything is all right, you can sign a contract. So put a contract in place. We use DocuSign for that simple contract. So let them sign the contract and also consider a payment schedule. What you can do is you can do, for example, 50-50 split, 50% upfront, 50% afterwards, bi-weekly payments, payment after successful delivery. something you can play with. So that's how sales works. High level, how we do it, what you need to consider. All right, and before we get into part 2, there's one more thing that I want to show you, and that's this interesting article over here. Thanks to AI, we're in the golden age of freelancing. There are a lot of interesting statistics in here, and what they found, they interviewed a bunch of top tech professionals, and they indicated that they are all leveraging AI, first of all, to increase their productivity. Well, this is, I think, what we all should be doing. But they also capitalize on this generative AI hype by building solutions for startup and enterprises. So they took a group of top tech professionals, and it basically said that half of them had already built a solution, a GenAI solution for startups or an enterprise. And 68% of the respondents in the survey said that generative AI makes them more likely to pursue an independent career working for multiple companies. It's a really interesting article, a really interesting take on how generative AI and automation reduces the need for freelancers in some fields, copywriters, marketing, all of the stuff that can really be automated. But on the other hand, because companies notice that they can automate this, they now need freelancers, contractors who can help them to create these automations. And this is an ideal opportunity for freelancers because these are companies that don't have AI engineers or data scientists inside of their company on payroll. That wouldn't make sense. They just need someone, a technical partner, freelancer, contractor, whatever, that can help them every now and then to build these automations. And then they can over time replace the overhead that they're spending on customer support, marketing, etc., and now funnel that money into potentially you who steps in as a contractor. Really interesting take, and it's definitely something that I've noticed. I've been freelancing for 5 years already. Basically, when the OpenAI API came out, I almost completely switched to building generative AI solutions just because of how much demand and opportunities there is. So for my freelancing business, which is now not even a freelancing business anymore, Data Lumina is now a full development company, but I've been able to make that transition because of generative AI. Do you want to dive deeper into how to find generative AI projects or how to find clients? Then you can check out this YouTube video.
You got some tech skills.
I will link that as well. So this is how to find freelance data and AI projects in 2024. It's a 23-minute video going deeper into the more specifics, some books, some strategies about everything that we've discussed here. All right, with that said, we concluded part 1. Let's now get into how to build generative AI projects. And let's start with fundamentals to keep in mind. At the core, every generative AI project follows this pattern. You have inputs, you have processing, and you have outputs. Generative AI, generative meaning output, these models generate stuff. And they generate stuff based on input. This is your data and your prompts. And the processing happens inside the application. So how do you bring all of this together? And there is an output. This can be in the form of text. This can be in the form of even images. This can be in the form of any type of combination, documents, you can put it together. And then also you have just the file outputs, but you also have the destination. Same for the input. You have the data, but you also have the source where it's coming from. And usually if you consider a full generative AI project, it combines the elements of getting some information from a system or an input or a form. There's some type of connection. You take that data, you process it, you add the prompts, you add the large language model, you generate something new, put it into desired format, and then also put it in the desired output place, whether that's on the website, in a content management system, in a folder, on a storage account. That is Generative AI Projects 101, a typical flow that the applications follow. When you start to build these projects, you always want to start by validating the idea locally, meaning getting a proof of concept. You can even sell this as a separate phase, which is what we sometimes do, but you should also be careful with that and really communicate with the client that if you do a proof of concept, it's literally only to test and validate the idea, not something tangible that they can use. This is a mistake that we've made in the past where we thought, okay, let's do a proof of concept. We're going to prove that this works because these projects are very innovative. They're new. A lot of these use cases are not proven yet. And sometimes there's a little bit of ambiguity or uncertainty whether this will actually work. Mostly in terms of, is the quality of the output good enough? Can we control for hallucinations? All of those questions. But you want to start locally. And you should really get clear on that pattern. So get clear on the input data, the processing step, the desired output, and the location. And usually it helps to create a flow diagram. So create a flow diagram. You can use something like draw.io or Figma and write out the application's flow. Think about, where do we need to get data from? What do we need to combine? What kind of prompts do we maybe need? And then what is that output going to look like? Then also take prompt engineering seriously. So don't just write a prompt simply by the first thing that comes up when you're working on this, or by asking ChatGPT to write the prompt for you. Don't be lazy here. Your prompt is almost as important, maybe it is as important as the code that you're writing. So follow proven prompt frameworks and templates. More on that in a little bit, but take prompt engineering seriously. And also consider the data is more important than the AI that you're using. When it comes to generative AI, everyone has the same models, almost. Of course, there's fine-tuning, all of that, but generally everyone is using the same intelligence here. The difference is the data, and the data is in terms of your literally your input data, your company data, proprietary data that you're using, but also your prompts. So combining those two is really what makes your application unique and potentially better than the competition, for example. All right, then let's get into tools and techniques. So we use pure Python to build our generative AI solution. So we use Python backends. For prompt engineering, something that you could look into is we like to structure our prompts by first always focusing on a role, then a task description, step by step using chain of thought prompting. Instructions, we give it context, we add emotional impact, and we also add some few shot examples, and then we tie all of this together in a markdown format. So these are proven prompting techniques based on literature. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend looking this up. Then for large language model providers, so the brain, the intelligence of your generative AI applications. You can consider OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, or Claude. We almost always use Azure OpenAI because we have the added check mark where Microsoft ensures that they're not sharing your data with OpenAI, even though Microsoft is partly owns OpenAI. But for the clients that we work with, we can say, hey, your data is as safe as the emails in your Outlook inbox. Most of the clients that we work with, they are already using Microsoft. It's a trusted partner, so that just helps. That's why we use Azure OpenAI. Here's a big one, huge one, which I also have a video on. Utilize Pydantic and Instructor for robust LLM integration. I will not be diving into what that is all about, but I will link this video. This is going to completely change the way you build LLM application. Development best practices. When it comes to large language models and AI, be innovative, but minimize AI usage. Use LLM processing as a last resort. What do I mean by this? If we consider the typical flow of input, processing, output, etc., there are naturally going to be steps within your application where some of these processing steps you can just do through a regular function, maybe through regex, maybe through a simple if-else statement. Make sure to maximize that functionality first, and using an LLM should really be your last resort. So really, when you cannot continue in your data processing pipeline without AI, that is where you introduce AI. And why do you want to do this? Because first of all, it slows down your application, it introduces costs, it can introduce hallucination. The more API calls you have to make, the more challenging it's going to be to scale and optimize and maintain your application. Now, we're talking about generative AI applications. So at some point, you're going to have to introduce an LLM or AI, because otherwise it's not a generative AI application. But just keep that in mind. Because these models are so good, they can, if you really break it down to, if you really break problems down to the most fundamental small part, an LLM can solve almost any problem, especially if you utilize Pydantic and Instructor. You can let it analyze all kinds of problems and then give, for example, a Boolean value, true, false, and use that to decide what the next flow of the application should be. But really think about it. Can I do this just with code first. If not, only then resort to LLMs. Here's another just random tip. We leverage Azure Document Intelligence a lot for parsing documents. So RAG is a common use case for generative AI applications. A problem with RAG is splitting up the data into relevant chunks that you can then put into your vector database for the retrieval. We use Azure Document Intelligence to split up documents and let it output Markdown. And then here's the trick. We take that Markdown and we split the document based on the header. So we split by hashtag. And this way we can easily split any PDF document up into sections where all of the context of this section is relevant versus just chunking by, for example, 1,000 characters and splitting something up midway. So use this to your advantage. This is really a really great tool. It's cheap, it's fast, it's great. Okay, then for web applications. So whenever we have to put something, an application live where it can run in the background and clients can access it or can listen for webhooks, triggers, etc., we use Fast API. So this is our framework of choice. It works on top of the Pydantic schemas, so that helps because we also leverage that for our large language models. So Pydantic plays a core role in how we define our data models and how we validate our applications, which overall increases the robustness of your applications. All right, so then next, if the application requires scale, meaning lots of users, maybe even like multiple organizations, multiple users, you can implement something like task queuing. We use Celery for that if scaling is needed. So this lets you create a task queue where every time a request comes in, we use a separate queue to place that new request in. And then Celery just handles that step by step in order to make sure your system does not overload. Quick example, if you have your application and all of a sudden 1,000 requests come in, it's very likely that the server that you're running that on is not going to process that very well. That's where something like Celery can come in. Let's see, where was I? Okay, then large language model monitoring. We use LangViews. Having a way to monitor your applications in terms of traces, meaning you can literally see the prompt and the data that was sent to the model, to the large language model, is really a must for debugging and monitoring at scale. So we use LangViews because it's fully open source. So we self-host it. It's great. It's very similar to Langsmith. Okay, then front-end development. A lot of these applications also require some kind of front-end for the client to interact with. Not always, but usually it happens. So either they have to trigger a pipeline or they have to upload some documents. They want to start a process. If you want a simple UI, you can look into Streamlit, which is nice because you can build front-ends using pure Python. So it's a language you probably already know. So you can get started with that. If you want more complex UIs, you can develop something custom with JavaScript, React, Next.js. But this is for a lot of people probably watching, data scientists, machine learning engineers. This is not our default stack. I don't know JavaScript, so I always partner up with someone if this is required. Another great tip, sometimes Airtable is all you need. Airtable is really awesome. It's a low-code database tool. It's basically a Google Sheets and Excel on steroids. It works really great, but the cool thing is you can also create forms. So sometimes that is all you need. And you can trigger webhooks, you can trigger automation. So you can even have custom code trigger in intermediate steps. So sometimes that is all you need. Databases. We personally, if we need a structured database, we use Postgres. For unstructured databases, we use MongoDB. And again, we just follow the open source principle here. And then for vector databases, you can look into Quadrant, or for simpler use cases, you can look into Postgres with pgvector, which is actually what we are running right now for a RAG application that we have live. Quadrant is a vector database specific database, so it has a little bit, it has more functionality specifically for querying, filtering, etc. But sometimes this is all you need, and it's really straightforward to get started with that. All right, and then let's get into project management. So up until this point, I've talked a lot about frameworks, tools, techniques that we use to consider this core project pattern, input, processing, output, and tie everything together. This is the stack that we're using. But how do you manage these projects, which becomes more and more important as you start to work with a team? But even if it's just you, this is also important. For version control, we use GitHub, but we're on the paid plan to protect our branches. So for example, we can just straight push to the main if that is the production branch for one of our applications. You have a little bit more control when it comes to security, privileges, all of that. So we just use GitHub, but you can also use, what are the other ones? You have Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, but we make sure you have a solid version control in place. And then when it comes to task management, you can use a simple planning board. So you can use GitHub Issues, you can use Trello, Jira, Linear, or ClickUp. That's what we're using, and that's also the sponsor of today's video. If you're anything like me, juggling all your tasks, documents, and projects can be a real headache. That's where ClickUp comes in, a single app to bring all of this together. Now, I personally love ClickUp because it lets me manage everything in one place with customized views, seamless integrations, and real-time updates. Also, as a developer, I love the GitHub integration and automations to manage my development projects. And creating and sharing documents for my team or for my clients has never been easier. I've tried all the other apps like Trello, Notion, Jira, or Linear, but to me, there was always something missing, and ClickUp just made sense. So if you're looking to boost your productivity, whether that's for personal projects or team collaborations, give ClickUp a try. It's made a huge difference for me. Click the link in the description to get started. So yeah, ClickUp is awesome. So even this document that I'm sharing right now, all ClickUp. So I love how we can do everything in one place inside of our company. But that concludes part 2, how to build these generative AI projects. And again, I did a high level overview of the stuff that we're using. This is endlessly, infinitely complex. And again, each video could have a separate part on its own. So make sure if you want to know more about a certain topic, framework, let me know in the comments. Then let's get into part 3. And this is, like I've said, this is the most challenging of them all. How to deliver generative AI projects. Because like I've said, building something on your machine that runs when you click play or run script is something entirely different from something that you put into production on a server where it just runs, clients can use it, clients can access it, and most importantly, it adds value to the company on a consistent basis. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about some principles and things to keep in mind. So going from local POC to production is hard. Data scientists are not software engineers. This is a tricky one. So I have a data science background. I'm learning a ton about software engineering. So for the past year that I've been 1.5 years already, that I've really been diving deep into this, I've learned a ton, but I still wouldn't consider myself a software engineer. So whenever it comes to the point where we really have to put things into production, this is where I partner up with a true software engineer who knows this stuff and who's done it before. Next, hallucinations become hard to monitor and fix at scale. Writing your prompt, putting in your data, running a couple of tests locally is all great. But when you have a system that has hundreds, maybe even thousands of queries every day, there are going to be hallucinations, especially in the beginning. And spotting those hallucinations is pretty challenging. And that becomes really hard. And this is also where tools like LangViews can come in, and where you should really closely monitor your system overall in order to make sure that it remains stable. Another tricky thing is, let's say you spot a hallucination. You change the prompt. Now you fix the hallucination. But changing this prompt by maybe adding this one sentence, don't do this, or specifically do this or that, how is that going to affect the system as a whole? These are all questions and challenges that everyone right now working on these type of project is literally figuring out how to manage this at scale. It's challenging. Also remember, software requires constant monitoring and maintenance. Many companies don't have the right mindset for these ongoing costs and the improvements. A lot of clients, they come to you, they have a request, we want to do something with AI, we want to build this automation, blah, 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 cool. But they expect you to just come in. Usually they think that it's actually way cheaper than it actually is. These projects are expensive. So you have to first elaborate on that, but then also explain them that maintaining those applications and improving them is also going to be pricey. And now this is going to be a trade-off between, are they going to self-host? Do they already have the infrastructure and the personnel in place for you to literally come in as a developer and then hand it over to them? then of course it becomes a lot easier. But if you have to self-host, it becomes more tricky. Let's get into that, hosting options. So you should decide what's the best fit for this project. So letting the client host this or self-hosting. We do both. Sometimes our clients come to us and say, Dave, we already have an Azure environment. We can give you access, develop in our environment, and we'll maintain it. We'll take care of the costs. That's on one part, that's great because then the infrastructure is already there. On the other hand, if clients come to us, like you ask them about infrastructure, cloud provider, they have no idea. No, we don't have that. Okay, you can offer to self-host. So self-host meaning we can offer that we host the solution. So this is more work, something you should be prepared for, but it's a chance, an opportunity for recurring revenue. So that could be an interesting one. But then you should also really consider this. Do you actually want to do this? Because it can be stressful and you need the right skills. So this could also be the point really where you partner up with someone that has experience with that. So all things to consider. All right, then let's get into cloud platform. So like I've said, we use Microsoft Azure. That is just mainly because most of the big companies and clients that we work with here in the Netherlands use Microsoft Azure. But you can also consider AWS or Google Cloud. I know that in the US, AWS is a lot bigger. Pick something that works for you. In general, they all high level can do the same stuff. Deployment and maintenance. So we recommend, if you put things in production, to use Docker for consistent and scalable application deployment. So take everything that you've built, put it inside a Docker file, a Docker container, and then deploy it through that. Environments. If it's really a big project affecting lots of users potentially, I would always recommend splitting it up into a production and a test environment. So you have your own production environment running where clients, users are interacting with, and you also have a test environment where first you develop, then you push it to test, make sure that everything runs stable, and then you push it to production. Then your CI/CD pipeline. So we use GitHub automation to streamline the deployment process. So we create separate branches to push to separate servers, for example, so to the production or the test environment. It's all automated. You can set it up using GitHub automations. Then testing, so make sure to implement unit tests so you can ensure the reliability and functionality of your application when you start to improve, add new features. Then also, again, the cost transparency. Be clear about server/API cost and maintenance fees. So for this can sometimes be a little bit tricky, but all these cloud providers, they have calculators that you can use to say, okay, what resources do you use? What's the plan that you're using? What's the volume? And you can get a ballpark estimate of what this is going to cost, first and foremost at the server level. So just running the servers, running the infrastructure. And then with these AI applications where also a lot of the costs, depending on the scale of the application come from, is just the API cost of doing the calls to either OpenAI, to Claude, or to Azure OpenAI. And for this, you ideally with the client want to set up a monthly payment structure. So be clear about this. If it's in their environment, you don't have to deal with this. Maybe only just a maintenance fee, or just talk or explain to them, okay, if you ever need me for maintenance improvements, this is my hourly rate, and you can do it a little bit more flexible on demand. Or you could offer a set hours per month or per week that you are available and put them on a retainer. Different ways to go about that. Monitoring. We use Sentry, which I've personally recently discovered. This is great. So Sentry is a monitoring tool, and it has connectors, templates for all kinds of frameworks. So it also has a framework or template, whatever you would call that, for Fast API. And basically the thing that Sentry does is whenever something in your application results in an error, it's going to log that. And we have it hooked up to our Slack channel. And now when we put this into, when we have an application running into production, and there is, for example, a new example where there is some data missing, and through that a function errors because there is what really happens often is, for example, that the key is not available, so you get a key error on some of your data. That's very common with these, at least the applications that we're building. It shows up, and then we can catch that, make it optional, or perform a check, etc. So we use Sentry for that. Great tool. Okay. Finally, security metrics, and then I want to dive into an example architecture that we've recently worked on for a project and that you can hopefully take a little bit of inspiration from. But security measures, also really important. So first of all, we have API keys and credentials. So you're working with clients, they're sharing information with you. Make sure to store and treat all of this information carefully. We use 1Password to just store it internally. So whenever a client shares an API key, password, whatever, we use 1Password. Then also for all the authentication methods or connections that you have on your application, always make sure that there is some form of multi-factor authentication. So this is for databases, for APIs, for webhooks. So use a header key, for example. So make sure that that is all safe. And of course, this gets more and more important depending on the sensitivity of the data that you're dealing with. If it's really sensitive data, you can also consider VPNs to really put your application on lock and block everything except for one whitelisted IP, or Azure has something where you can create an internal VPN gateway and it can just connect to that. So security measures, really important. And the thing is also for a lot of people working on these applications, not their core strength. I see a lot of people, either data scientists, data engineers, machine learning engineers, enter into this field, and you really want to consider all of these software development best practices when you're going to put applications like this into production. Also for people just in general, new to the space, new to AI, new to software development, these are all things that you have no idea about. And I say that because I still am like literally a noob to most of these things. And I've been doing this for 5 years already. So make sure that you understand what you don't know and partner up with people that do know that stuff in order to make sure you can just provide reliable solutions for your clients. All right, and then let's get into an example architecture diagram of a project that we're literally working on right now. And I don't see a lot of people talking about this, and I'm just gonna give it away either way, but this is, I think, in my opinion, such a nice blueprint for lots of generative AI solutions that you can build. Right now, the only thing that's missing is that this doesn't have a front end. That's because we're integrating with another application that we're getting data from and sending the data through. But other than that, this is a really scalable, robust, and secure framework that we're working with right now. So high level, it's mostly just a summary of everything that I've discussed in part 2 and part 3 of this video. But for this particular solution, we're connecting with an existing application. So we're using their API and we're using HTTP triggers. Whenever something happens in the system, in that application, we can set up a trigger and it hits our backend. So it sends a request to our fast API backend, and from there we get all the data, and that is where the pipeline is triggered. So we use a queuing mechanism in here, and we use Redis as an intermediate step. I think that's the only thing that I didn't mention in the video, in the document. And through Redis, we sent it to Celery to put it into a queue. We can also visualize that using Flower. And then we set the output is then put into the database, so in the PostgreSQL database. So this is how we log internally all of the data that we're using later for referencing, for monitoring, and we enrich that data as well. But the backend and the queue worker, that is where all the magic is happening in terms of the processing. So we take that data, we take it through a data processing pipeline where we perform various data enrichments and also multiple large language model queries in between to then finally get a desired output. And that output is sent back into the system that we're dealing with. So this is a architecture that you can copy for lots of use cases where you integrate AI into a current system, which is a really good use case. Now, next to that, here we have a separate resource group where we also have LangView. So we talked about that. Then we also, this is the production version. We also have the test version, which is a literal copy of what we have running in production. The only difference is that it cannot send information back to the source application. And then the cool thing about this, where when it comes to security, we host all of this in Microsoft Azure, and we put it into, we created an Azure virtual network and then created a VPN gateway. And we only allow incoming requests through this VPN gateway. And that means when we as developers want to work with this, we, with our laptops, can connect with this VPN gateway. And that is the only way to connect with this and connect with these resources. Anything else will be blocked by default. So this is how you can entirely shut off your application so no one can reach it, because we're dealing with sensitive information in this database, in this whole system. And we don't want that to be interrupted, of course. And then here we make sure we have some type of multi-factor authentication. So we send the request to our backend, but we also have an authentication through a header in there that we've implemented. So this is a really cool, in my opinion, an architecture, and not all props to me. This is really the software engineer that I'm currently working with that has engineered this for the project that we're working on. So that concludes this video. So I hope this was helpful. It's a pretty long one. I really went in depth talking about what we currently do inside our company, Data Lumina. So if you found this video helpful, please leave a like and also consider subscribing if you want to learn more about what we're doing, how we're helping our clients, or want to learn more about freelancing, how to get started with that. So make sure to subscribe if that sounds like you. And then for now, make sure to watch this video next. That's the video where I dive deeper into the client acquisition part, how you can find your own clients, how you can get started with tools, resources, books that you can dive into. So make sure to check that out next. And then I'll see you in the next one.